Next In.
Welcome to Next In. Today, I've got a special surprise for you, and we're going to be speaking to Derek, who is the CTO at Yoodli. Welcome, Derek. How's your day going?
It's going great, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, in Seattle today, correct?
Yep, we're based out of Seattle. The weather's actually pretty good today, so enjoying the nice fall.
I'm waiting for winter to come because here in Nashville, we're dealing with 87-degree weather, and my office is it's 79 degrees now. So we've at least gone down in temperature a little bit here. That's why I've only got 2.5 hearts. It's the heat in the room that keeps knocking me down a bit. But so Derek, tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Cool. I'm Derek, originally from New York, and I'm living in Seattle now. I've been here for 15, 16 years. So it's home for me.
From one coast to the next.
Exactly. Definitely, I'm more of a West Coast person in retrospect, but you're born where you're born. And so I've come out here, joined Microsoft after university, went to a mid-sized company called Panopto, which was a video content management system, and then moved to Yoodli after that.
Awesome. And what made you originally, I guess, what brought you to Seattle originally?
Microsoft and work, honestly. It was a job I was excited for coming out of college. I was originally really interested in game programming. So I wanted to come find an opportunity there. I ended up joining the DirectX team at Microsoft. I learned that I didn't want to work in game programming, and then I went off in a different direction.
Interesting. So, hearts up top, gaming in the background. What made you want to make that transition? Because you're not different, right? There's a lot of people that are out there that like originally their eyes are kind of like, I really want to get into the gaming world. They get into it. Maybe they're like, this isn't necessarily what I thought I was going to be, and made the transition to go into core products, enterprise functions like you did. How did you rationalize and make that decision?
For me, it really came down to where my passions lay to some degree, as well as the sacrifices a lot of people make to go into the game industry. I mean, people accept lower salaries. They typically work much harder. It's a much more temperamental industry in general. And I was really passionate about gaming coming out of college. It was a big part of my life. And then over time, I began to enjoy other things. And so It was a mix of not quite enough passion to make those sacrifices, as well as a lot of interest in the way I can impact people in other ways.
Okay. And when you made that transition, right, what do you imagine was that learning curve going from kind of the gaming focused environment to going into kind of this enterprise production? Obviously Microsoft, I imagine even that transition from one team to the next was radically different.
Yeah, I did the transition coming out of Microsoft and joining Panopto. So I went from a role that was very low level C++, where we were writing a software rasterizer. That would basically be the fallback if you didn't have a GPU on your system. So I was working in bits of assembly, all sorts of low level concepts, but it was a lot of high performance code. Then going over to Panopto, I worked in the media layer to start out with. And so the transition wasn't too bad for me, but I did learn a lot about a much stronger focus on customers, customer experiences, customer journeys, and how to kind of positively impact folks. As well as I think there's all sorts of interesting teething problems going from very large company, lots of protections and guide rails versus a small company where I shipped a bug that broke everyone's recorders. They're just randomly close and lose all their content. So we had to obviously fix that very quickly.
You had a bunch of students and teachers that were like, what is going on?
Exactly. Just midway through recording just like this, it just all goes away. That was very embarrassing, and I've learned many ways not to do that again. But
so if we get cut off, what we are going to immediately assume is some ex-gamer decided to play around with some things and broke it. So it was yes. The gamer's fault, not anyone else's. Yeah. Too much Mountain Dew. So when you think about, so you made two major transitions then, right? Not only did we make a transition out of industry, you made a transition even in another portion, which is culture, where you went from like this large organization, Microsoft, to all of a sudden making a transition into a startup. Mm-hmm. What was that like? What was it like? So not only did you learn like a new kind of code base, not only did you have to learn a new product base, a new persona of customer, but then you also had to figure it out in like this startup world. What was that like when that transition happened?
I found it really, really invigorating. And I think the reason that is in my heart, I'm somewhat of a blend between a generalist and a specialist. I like going pretty deep into a topic, but I actually like jumping around and fixing things and kind of building more end-to-end features as well. So for me, it was a really pleasant transition of, oh, this is way more engaging. It's a lot faster pace. I have the ability to hear from customers how I'm positively impacting them, how I released this feature and they're thrilled and they're so happy and they want to. Like, I've had people actually thank me at customer events before, which was a very humbling moment.
Slightly
Where
different than the video game industry, where everybody's just a bunch of internet trolls and the community's being like.
there's some happy people there too,
Uh,
But yeah, it was to me really, really invigorating. I know it goes different ways for different folks, especially if people who want a lot of structure don't really enjoy a 20-person dev team or a 10-person dev team. But if you kind of enjoy the ability to take ownership and have play up to the line all the time, it's really fun.
what do you mean by that? By play up to the line all the time?
You have a lot of opportunities to take risks that you just shouldn't, like, absolutely shouldn't take in a big company, right? If you've got 1 million users and you ship something that may negatively impact 5% of users, that's a big deal, and you've hurt a lot of people. When you have 1,000 users, well, that's 5 people. You can go and apologize to them very directly,
You
and
could shake their hand. You could
yeah,
do a whole
exactly,
tour about it.
yeah, exactly. And you have the opportunity to push things a bit quicker along and take some risks, which is fun. Obviously, have to temper that a bit, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so there's a lot of people that are probably listening, and comment below if you have a similar story, if you have a share that you want to give. But for you, Derek, you've made the transition where you went from enterprise dev, you left, you went to Panopto, you got promoted, you went through the ranks, you got into management, and then you left, and then you joined Yoodli. Now you're the CTO at Yoodli. There's probably millions of people that are listening that are like, that's my goal. Like, how do I become a CTO? What did you do? How do I get there? So like for you, what do you believe that allowed you to make those steps that allowed you to, take on the role of CTO at Udly?
yeah, I think a lot of it happened within the confines of Panopto. Microsoft trained me really well from a technical angle, and whenever I'm mentoring someone, I often point to that as like the first step is just become a really good dev. It helps so much. It'll make the rest of your life so much easier and gives you so much optionality. So I think for anyone early career, just focus on the fundamentals, learning how to build things the right way, debug things the right way, understand how architecture works. But from there, what really allowed me to grow rapidly at Panopto, I think, was I I took a lot of initiative in terms of trying to work within the confines, not step on people's toes, but try to push myself along, take on big projects, and make sure I delivered them on time and delivered them the right way. And that allowed me to kind of grow into a technical leadership role to begin with, and building that trust and the reliance of people knowing that I'll tell them if something's running late. I'll tell them if something's going wrong. I'll make sure to push myself if this is something really important to land on time. Uh, gives Opens the doors for managers to take a lot more risks on you and give you more ownership and see how you evolve with that.
So were there times where you tried taking on a project and people were like, no, like you can't handle it? And you're like, I can. And there had to be some convincing, or was it always just like, I asked for it, I received it, easy peasy, wash my hands. It was always rainbows and butterflies. Like, what did that look like because again, I think there's a lot of people that are like, okay, I want to take on more, but they don't know how to, they don't know what that means.
Uh, for me, it was a lot of uh, a bit of lucky opportunity in there too. But it would be very much, I see a really interesting project, and I would at least lay the table of, hey, I'm interested in taking this on. I think it'd be really a good growth moment and enjoyable for me. And I'll work towards doing it, and I'll do X, Y, Z to try to make sure that we do this the right way. I do think that uh, asking to take on an interesting project and doing it from a humble place, not aggressively or like try and push too hard. It does open the door because it helps managers also think like, oh yeah, this person has been doing well. Maybe I should throw them this interesting project to work on.
Yeah, because it's a common trim that I hear. One of the biggest issues when people are like, I'm trying to go through the ranks, but I don't know how to. It's just, are you raising your hand? Are you asking to do it? Or are you asking, for feedback if they say no? If they do say no, how do you respond to that feedback to make sure that you can adjust and go through the ranks and take on more? Because sometimes it's just like, really, this is so time sensitive and so complex that I need to give it to somebody else that we know is capable of it. But next time, right?
Yeah.
And was there ever a moment for you where you received some feedback from somebody that maybe you were like, I didn't love this feedback, but it was something that genuinely helped me? Like I absorbed that feedback.
Mhm.
It hurt my feelings maybe a little bit, but I learned from it and I grew from it. And can you give me an example of some of the negative feedback you received once that allowed you to kind of grow?
Yeah, there was one really big project that I ended up leading, and it was kind of a jump ball project. And basically, the idea of it was one of our big problems at Panopto was costs of goods sold. Effectively, how much does it take to encode video and handle that pipeline? And we were, for historical reasons, running on Windows machines in AWS, which are monumentally more expensive than Linux machines. So we decided to transition over. And that ended up being something like 2 to 3 dev years of work split over 4 devs, so delivered in about 6 months. And what I realized as this was transferred over to me and I kind of had to take the ball for it, was we just didn't have the organizational muscle to know how to give a timeline for this and hold to a timeline and treat it as a project that really needs to be actively managed rather than just saying, we think there's this much time left. Like, let's hope for the best. So I think I got a lot of very kind of direct feedback, which was interesting at the time because I was getting feedback that also didn't come with solutions. And sometimes that happens because organizations just don't know what to do, but it'd be like, this needs to be delivered on time, like figured it out, but not here's a tool for it, it's just figured it out. So that was really humbling. It was a very challenging project for me to run and to learn how to manage timelines and people and schedules. But throughout that, through the way it was humbling, it made me help find my mentors and the people I can look to, and I ended up just kind of out of the blue scheduling a one-on-one with our COO, which was incredibly helpful. It was like one of the most impactful 1 hour sessions I've had with anyone. And those were the kind of moments that I found really helped me grow.
So that was going to be my next question is like, if there was a time where you had like an influential mentor or role model in your career, and I was curious on like, how did their specific guidance or perspective shape the trajectory and the philosophy behind your engineering leadership?
Yeah, so I'll jump into the example I just gave there after a quick aside. When I look for mentors, I try to think through what I really, really like about someone as well as their weaknesses, because everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. And then I always try to tailor the mentorship I get or what I look for by looking towards their strengths and trying to also understand if I ask them this type of question, like, am I just going to be playing towards their weakness? Like, who should I really be asking what type of question to? So in this case, our CEO was an incredibly experienced and strong manager and really understood how to uh, run projects the right way and manage timelines and manage expectations and everything else. So I just went in with lists of questions and uh, took him through the situation and the actions we had taken, and almost using the star style approach to just kind of drive to the details. And a lot of the feedback just came down into like, you have no overall schedule. There's no Gantt chart. There's no dependency tracking. You weren't looking at things at the right cadences, because as I've grown as a manager, I've learned that a lot of it is not looking at the details too often. It's how often do you want to look at the details so you have a fresh mind and change and react rather than getting bogged down like looking at a schedule every single day. So that was really impactful in just like learning about all these mechanisms and these philosophies and kind of principles that I can use to apply elsewhere.
And do you imagine you follow any of those philosophies to a T, or do you believe that you have kind of like a Picasso theory approach where it's like, I listened to like these 5 different methodologies, these 5 different philosophies, and I cherry picked the things that matched me that I knew I could hold myself accountable to and I could deliver? Like, how did you deal with that? Because there's so many philosophies out there. There's so many different types of approaches.
Yeah, and I totally fall into the Picasso style of thought. for me, you have to be true to yourself. To some degree, you can't be someone else. You have to also understand your own strengths and weaknesses very deeply. So I will try to understand kind of the principles in my mind don't change, and there aren't that many versions of the principles. It's like, communicate clearly your timelines. Don't have two people owning the same thing, because then it becomes a problem who actually owns it. Like those very simple baselines. But spanning out from there, the way that you implement them or build them into your life has to kind of respect your working style. So like the things I found were really effective for me that don't work for other people necessarily are using calendar blocks to make sure that I'm allocating time each week to review everything, then go through the plans. And I ended up actually doing planning, probably a toxic work culture thing for myself on Sunday night, because I find it's just like a really clear time where I can think things through without the noise of a Monday.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very much just kind of working around my own personality and knowing my strengths and weaknesses, and then adapting what works for me.
Yeah, and so like one of the other things I want to get into is like there are going to be people that are aspiring to be CTOs, and there are going to be people that are just aspiring to just be engineers, right? Either one of them. But for someone looking at stepping into the world of engineering, what are the core principles or values that you believe somebody needs to be able to internalize on day one for them to be set up for success long term?
The biggest one is having a growth mindset, I think. Coming at things from really humble position, trying to always be learning. Some people really like journaling or notes for this. I found for me it came a bit more naturally because I'm a very introspective personality. Neither good nor bad. It's just the nature of the beast. And so just having always being kind of in the position of what am I growing on, what am I working on, what's the next thing that I need to before it's on, helps so much. And then from there, it's build up your fundamentals. Like if you can't deliver a project at a high quality bar, you're going to have trouble ever being trusted. If you don't communicate your timelines well, people will have trouble trusting you. If you don't take ownership when things go wrong, people will have trouble trusting you. Like building the kind of sense of trust of like you're a very trustworthy and responsible person will make it way easier for any manager to take a bet on you.
Yep. It's a core value here at Next Level where it's just like to earn respect, you have to deliver results. Like at the end of the day, like trust is not given, it's earned, and it's earned through results. And recognizing that earning trust is a mechanism of delivering what you say you're going to do. And it's more or less an accountability function, right? Where it's like, if I take on this responsibility, I trust you because you can deliver results on what that action item is, even if it's just like go take out the trash, right? If you're at home, just go take out the trash. You said you're going to do it, just do it. Like,
Yeah,
you're going to build something cool, make sure it's built.
exactly. And if you kind of take an empathetic approach to all this stuff too, of hey, think about your manager's position. They have a hot project, they need to give it to someone. If you have been not doing great in the last couple of projects, how could they possibly give it to you? Like it's going to show badly on them. And it's going to be a poor case of their managers trusting them. So I think always try and put yourself in the other person's shoes uh, helps you understand maybe where they're coming from, and then how to kind of do the dependency chain of where you want to end up.
Yeah, and so we kind of talked a little bit earlier, and you were saying, to be a good engineer, just learn the fundamentals, like do these things the right way, do that the right way. But but this concept of learning today, right? There's always like this, how do you incorporate continued education? How do you incorporate continued learning throughout the
Mhm.
time of you just doing your job, right? Because everybody they have these KPIs, they have these expectations, these deliverables, like whatever it might be. But in the engineering world, not too dissimilar from other areas, whether it's product or sales or whatever, but like in the engineering world, especially, like the world is constantly changing with emerging technologies. Uh, Consumer behaviors are constantly changing. So like, what are strategies and or habits that you've adopted over time to stay ahead of the curve? And what would you advise a newcomer to do to instill and to build habits for continued education and continued learning?
Yeah, it's a really great question because, as you framed it out, everything's almost accelerating, right? It's very hard to actually keep on the bleeding edge of things. The approach I've taken that I've found really, really helpful, and I don't actually know how well this applies to everyone, but this to me was very effective, is trying to understand the fundamentals of why. Like a new async pattern comes out, or as async was coming out, understanding how that was implemented at the low level threading level help me understand where it should be used and why we should use it and how we absolutely should not use it in some cases. And the same goes, I think, for things relating to CSS or JavaScript or any new technology. The more that you understand the fundamentals, the more quickly you can reason about new technologies and deliver the right results with them.
No.
I think you asked another question there, which is how do you just possibly keep up with all this in terms of continued education? It really varies. I mean, in some organizations, there's time carved out for it, which is great. And I think is something, organizations really should support because it's very difficult. Otherwise, you just have to have the passion for it. And I think trying to nurture your passion and figure out where your passion is will help direct you and give you the energy to keep working on these things.
Yeah, it's always been a question, which is if somehow you're incapable of doing a portion of your job in your free time, does it mean that you're in the right job? I don't know.
I think the bigger the company is, the less of a problem I think it ends up being in many cases. If you're in a small company, your bet is really on the company's success more so than the flat benefits. So I think if you're going for a small company, you probably will have the energy if you're in the right place.
Ideally, right? Like I've always gone like when I know that I've accelerated at my job, I'll always have these small little side projects that I want to do, not because I have to do them, but because I'm so like it reinvigorates me. It gets me excited. It fuels me. It makes me like all of a sudden I work until midnight doing this random thing. And then I come in the morning and I'm like, I'm ready to go again. And it's just like, if you could find something that energizes you, it's like you're in the right spot. If you're dreading going to work or leaving work, it's like clearly this is not the best option for you.
Absolutely. And I found that time and time again. The times that when I wanted to, or that when I should have left a job, but maybe it took me too long, were always when I was kind of dragging my feet and I wasn't really happy anymore, but I was just going through the motions because I hadn't come to that realization yet. I think there is one caveat there, which is often talked about, but always good to remember, which is burnout's the thing too. I've also had times where I stopped exercising because I was trying to work too hard and then got really burnt out and dragged my feet. And it turned out I just needed to go exercise after work again and felt a million times better after that. So,
yep. Pacing habits is important.
Yep.
Sprints will get you burnt out. And it's like, yeah, I did the same thing. I was like, I cold plunged it was like, I got like 101 days in. And then all of a sudden it was like, I missed one day and then it just,
yep.
I got to get back into that. I got to start cold plunging again. So I kind of want to transition a little bit and learn a little bit more about what you're doing now at Yoodli. Tell me, what are you doing at Yoodli? And then I want to start going into, after understanding that, kind of going into some of your hiring fundamental principles, how you guys look at that, why you look at it the way that you do, et cetera. But I want to pause for a second and go, what is Yoodli? What does Yoodli do?
Yeah. So Yoodli is an AI speech coach to help you perform better on your interviews, on upcoming speeches, on communicating in meetings and in the workplace, effectively trying to make everyone a better verbal communicator. You can think of us a bit like a Grammarly for speech. So we're a small startup. We've got 10 people right now, seed stage. So very, very early days, but still exciting and toiling away at making it something real.
So it's like if I'm thinking about doing a podcast and I want to get better, my voice presence, my inflection, whatever that might be, it's like Yoodli would go, hey, Shane, your podcast sucks. You need some coaching. Well, use Yoodli.
Yeah, exactly. So you could upload the podcast after the fact. You could use our desktop app to record only yourself, cutting out everyone else's voice during the podcast, and then go through it later and see, okay, how was my pacing? Did I use a bunch of weak words, filler words? Was I not sufficiently concise and maybe lost my viewers in my statements? That's all the dream and kind of features that we support.
That's awesome. And so what I want to kind of go into is like some of these fundamental principles that you have focused on hiring. So one of them is like, obviously you're the CTO, and whether it's in your seat or another, I have to assume that you're deeply involved in the hiring decision, but how do you strike the balance when you're hiring somebody and balance out the difference between culture fit and technical fit, especially in a field like engineering where both of them are extremely crucial?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's one thing I just want to mention up front is this has changed radically for me as I've been participating in interviewing at Microsoft and at Panopto, which is midsize, and now here in a startup. And I think all of them are just very, very different experiences and pipelines. The way I usually structure it, though, is the culture fit angle isn't really, in my opinion, about culture fit. I mean, I think if two personalities really clash, that's a problem, but it's almost more about value fit and trying to determine where your organizational values. Do you value things like earning trust and taking action and taking ownership? And those core concepts help you kind of drive your interviewing towards those things rather than like the beer test, which is very, very good at finding friends, but not very good at finding people who are good at their jobs. And that fundamentally, it's the second thing that you really need as a company.
When you think about it, it ties back to that core concept of can you build trust with someone? And so if you're interviewing somebody and you're trying to go, let's do a value fit versus a culture fit, what we're really doing is if we bring this person in, are they going to trust me as a leader to bring this person in? And knowing that we're discussing trust, we're not really discussing trust. What we're dealing with is we're talking about, is this person going to deliver results? And are they going to deliver results through me? Because the only way to earn trust is based off of your delivery cycle and your ability to build for the greater good. Because at the end of the day, our goal is over here together, and we have to be able to reach that goal. And that's why we're hiring them. So value fit is, do we trust that this person is going to be able to deliver results? And then how do we identify if this person is capable of delivering the results and the way that our team operates?
And
does that sound accurate?
That's accurate as a subset, though, because we do have a few other values at Yoodli and at past companies I've worked on. One of them is bringing positivity and enthusiasm and authenticity to work. So someone who is not going to be passionate is not going to, especially at a startup, be a good value fit, because we want to, one of our values is having people pour that passion into their work and into their process, because we think that helps everyone else apply themselves even more. And so that's something where you can say that at a high level, but envision a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures coming at that in different ways, but it's still a value. It's like a much more fundamental thing than, enjoys rock climbing or something like that.
So let me ask you this, like, was there ever an interview where maybe you weren't like super wowed by the technical capabilities of that person in the moment, but like all the other things aligned and you're like, the value fit is there, the technical fit is maybe below the bar that we want, but there was these other value metrics that were like, they did something in the interview that inspired you to go, they're not quite there, but like we know that they will be, and we know that they can be, and somebody took accountability to make that happen. Has that ever happened to you? And what was that story, and why did you take that chance?
Yeah. So I guess let me jump back a little bit into kind of my hiring philosophy. Fundamentally, what I hire for are people who will bring the smarts and the drive to succeed. And so I'm more willing to take a bet on someone who maybe is a bit less experienced, unless this is very specific business critical situation, but is going to be learning and growing and be a great team player. Because I think that kind of outweighs in the long term. And fundamentally my philosophy for hiring is hire for 5, 6, 7 years down the line. Like, your goal is to get people who are going to work in the long term. Saying that, so it kind of allows for another, what I wanted to say there was more, there's another angle to it too, which is interviewing is very inexact science, especially if you use something like leak code. Lots of people are bad at leak code, but are really good at their jobs. And you kind of have to understand people, you're seeing very thin slivers of people's experiences and skills. So when I'm going to a hiring loop, if someone doesn't do well, they would have to not do well in multiple different ways, in a coding interview and a system design interview and an architecture interview. So we tend to get pretty clean signal across there and a pretty good idea of where someone's strong or maybe has some concerns. And then we combine that with the value alignment and growth mindset and engagement to kind of come to a decision. So
when you're interviewing people, though, in those interviews, what are the most common mistakes that you've seen people make where you're just like, gosh, it's just like it's a repetition thing where you're like, this little mistake, like if we could magically Thanos snap this mistake away from the earth, like the average person would do better?
Yeah. I think when we talk about behavioral interviews, monologuing is a really bad one. People will just try to tell their entire resume when you've asked one question. And as you know, you can interrupt them and it's fine, but it leads to a kind of more questionable experience. You obviously don't want to have the interviewer have to interrupt you multiple times to kind of get to what they're getting at. I think that also making sure that you've prepared for all the different types of questions. So when I started interviewing around after leaving Panopto, I actually had a cheat sheet of the 16 different questions that I knew might get asked and just had a story ready for each one so that when the question was asked, I'd be ready to go. I've definitely had times before where I've asked something like, tell me a time about where you disagreed and committed, and people just said, I don't remember. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't know what to do with that as an interviewer. Like, do you have issues with disagree and commit? Do you maybe just have never been in that situation because you're not engaged?
Are you too agreeable? Like, are you always going to just agree with everything?
Yeah, exactly. It's just make sure the interviewer doesn't have to imagine too much because they may imagine things negatively rather than positively.
Yeah.
And then the last one I think is just being engaged. I think there's actually quite a few times, especially when you get to bigger companies where people come in and get to the end of the interview and you're like, okay, I've got 5 minutes of questions for you. And they say, oh, I don't have any questions. And it's just like, it's really weird because it's like, why you don't have passion for the job? You're not interested. Did we ask your questions before? It's just a very weird situation to be in.
You're like, do you like your job? It can be that simple. Like, what's your favorite thing about the team? Like, what's your favorite project that you've ever contributed to? Why was it your favorite project? What was your favorite challenge that you solved? Why was it your favorite challenge? What was the hardest thing that you solved? Why? Like, what are questions that like you hope people ask you? Like when you get to that point where you're like, hey, I have 5 minutes for you to ask questions. What are the things that you're hoping somebody says that are highly positive signals?
Usually the most positive signal is they understand who they're talking to. So they'll ask different questions to the CEO and the CTO and the engineer. And then it'll be questions usually about the team, the product, or the strategy. Are usually the ones where I'm like, oh, this person is really kind of thinking about this opportunity very seriously. They're really thinking, okay, like they're asking the CEO questions about long-term fundraising or finance or like business metrics. They're asking the CTO about product strategy and AI strategy or stuff like that. And they're asking an engineer like, even some questions like, what does your day-to-day look like? How many meetings are you in? Like, what's been one of the most challenging projects that you've had to work on? Tell me a bit about that. And like, what kind of interesting challenges might I have here?
Yeah. What are additional like positive signals? Like, let me say it the opposite way, where it's just like if you had like your perfect bar of people and those people could do the same thing every single time, what would you say is the perfect thing that people do when they're interviewing?
I'll answer it kind of from the startup mindset right now, which is, as I said earlier, is a bit different, but having someone who comes into the first interview, having played with the product a bit and having some questions and has already made kind of a decision in their mind of like, hey, I'm really passionate about this project or this product and company versus like, I'm not sure yet, but maybe I have some pointed questions to help me get there. I think just doing well on the technical sections, like making sure that you're prepared and you've done your homework. I've had people who 10 years in industry were just a bit cocky, honestly, and they came in totally unprepared and bombed the interview. And it's like, listen, you bombed the interview. Like, I can't make another decision. This is that you had your shot. Like, we're not going to randomly trust that maybe you're actually great, but this time you were just really bad.
One shot, one opportunity. Don't miss your chance to,
Yeah, there you go. And then I think just being engaged throughout the whole process always makes a big difference. Like, be responsive, be chatting, ask questions, poke a bit and try to learn more. I think it's the engagement makes a big difference because it feels like, wow, this person wants to be on the team and ideally allows your personality to shine through, which of course, as a candidate, you want that to be, and you try to find the right fit for yourself.
Cool. So before we jump off, I've got like a couple of final last questions, right? So if somebody were to go to Seattle and they were going to visit or to do something, what are you going to tell somebody to do if they were to come up to Seattle?
What do they like to do is always my first question.
What do you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, the things that I love about Seattle are mostly to do with the outdoors. So, even folks I know who have come out here not being hikers or anything like that, going out to Mount Rainier, going out to the Olympic Peninsula, or going into the Cascades is a really cool experience, especially if you're not from an area with big sharp mountains.
Have you ever done Mailbox Peak?
I actually this year I did the North Bend Triple Crown, which is you do Mailbox Peak, and then you do Mount Si, and then you do I don't know why I need to turn off that Mac OS feature. Mailbox, Mount Si, and Mount Tenerife back to back. So it was a long day.
Dude, I did Mailbox Peaks once, and I crawled out of there. My legs were jelly for like 3 days.
Yeah,
like,
it's a tough one. But yeah, I mean, I'm super passionate about hiking and getting outdoors. Actually, I take the bat. I'm not passionate about hiking. I don't like hiking that much, but I like getting outdoors and just getting on top of mountains. So definitely the outdoors, and then after that, explore the downtown, see Pike Place Market. This time.
I love the islands. After living in Seattle for like 19 years, going out to the islands was always a lot of fun. Orcas Island was probably one of my favorites. It felt like I was in Jurassic Park.
Absolutely. Orcas was great. Yeah. Definitely would recommend.
Favorite movie?
I'm not that much of a movie person. Movie and TV are just not.
You're like, I spend too much time with streaming and low-level systems all my life that I just just kidding.
Yeah, no, I don't have a really good explanation for it. I mean, I would say favorite movie probably something like Godfather, something kind of traditional, like really like engaging movie.
Fair. But if it's not movies, then what is it?
I like reading sci-fi. I don't think I read like high sci-fi that I'm going to be proud to list off a bunch of names. But I do really like reading sci-fi. And honestly, I like more kind of active things like games, cooking, making cocktails, stuff like that.
Fair. I was a terrible cook until COVID turned around, and all of a sudden now I can cook the world's best steak, and I can make mean old fashioned. So I recently found those passions.
Yeah, it's fun when you get into it and you get invested.
I think the difference is when you're good at it versus not good at it. There's a huge difference in quality where you're like, I'm really good at this. Now this is awesome, and I get to show off a little bit to myself, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And the speed becomes fun because it used to be, when I was starting out, everything I had to cook was like a 3-hour experience, and now it's more like I can do something really cool in 30 minutes, which is useful.
That's awesome. You're like, time yourself, go.
Yeah.
And you're an engineer, so you probably got it all figured out, and it's all systemized, and you're good to go. Well, Derek, I really appreciate you taking today. For those of the people listening, the millions of viewers or whatever, and they're wanting to get a hold of you, whether that's like, hey, I want to get better at this speech thing, and I want to get better at building my podcast or building my stage presence or whatever, how do I use Yoodli? What does that look like? And then step 2 is, hey, I'm really ready to join the mission, and I want to think about interviewing for Yoodli. How do people get in touch with you? So I guess those 2 questions.
Yeah, well, both you can just go to yoodli.ai. That's YODLI.ai. From there, you can sign up for the product. It's free to try out. So please take it for a spin. Hope you enjoy and hope it's useful. It does have an interviewing mode to help you prepare and kind of give you back and forth chances to chat with the interviewer and give you results afterwards. So if you're here because of interviewing, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not. Let me know either way.
Get some role play in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the number one thing that we hear people say is, wow, if I had just practiced a few more times, like it would have been a massive difference. Even my wife going through interviewing for 9 months found it was super, super helpful, which was kind of interesting experience in the household. Then after that, at the bottom of the page, there's a careers page. You can look at open careers. There's an email link there if you want to apply, so feel free. And then otherwise, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn to me if you have questions, want to drop a line, want to say that this was really useful or not useful at all to you. Either way, it's great.
And then what are you hiring for today?
Right now, we're hiring for a backend and a full stack role. Full stack role is more of a 70-30 front end, back end split. And then back end role is kind of a mix of generalist back end and DevOps. As with all startups, you get to wear all the hats.
All the hats. Well, again, Derek, really appreciate you taking your time and speaking to all the viewers today. Again, if you want to reach out to Derek, Yoodli.ai, You can comment below. You can connect with them on LinkedIn. Otherwise, thanks to everyone listening.
Yeah. Thank you, Shane. Bye-bye.
Next In.